beauty is my religion. Aesthetics inform every decision like I make in acquiring things, something from a teacup, that I sip my tea from, to the blanket on my bed. I take great joy in being
around beautiful things.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Olivia Cummings, and on this podcast, I'd like to introduce you to the people who inspire me in my life and work as a jeweler, designer, and the founder of Cleopatra's Bling. Artist Miranda Skocek transcends the traditional role of painter, creating wallworks, co-designing with fashion houses like Gorman and Silk Laundry, and crafting figurines inspired by ancient pagan traditions of her Slavic ancestry. We share a love of symbols and amulets, and we discussed how to bring their imagery and power into a contemporary context, all while honouring these traditions and building a successful artistic practice. Cleopatra's Bling acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the country where we work and their continuing connections to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders and all Kulin Nations people, past, present and future. Thank you, Miranda, for being on the Cleopatra's Bling podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Olivia.
Of course. We wanted to talk about your work. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to know a little bit about your Polish heritage, which is central to the work you create.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your lineage and what stories were passed down to you through your Polish heritage?
Yep. Well, both sides of my family are Polish. Mm-hmm. On mum's side, actually my great-grandmother was Russian. She escaped Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution.
Wow.
And then went to Poland, met my grandfather, and Dad's dad was in the Polish Merchant Navy, and during the Second World War, he was stationed in Kolkata. Wow. And heard of all these Polish women in a refugee camp in Mumbai. Anyway, so he met my grandmother in Mumbai, and he and my grandma settled in Kolkata. They loved India and its way of life. Yeah, and my father was born there. But then with partition, everything sort of fell apart and was not a good place to be, so they came to Australia. And my mum and her family, my dear auntie who passed away last year, and my mum, thank you, she and my mum, mum was 12 when she came to Australia. I always was sort of very drawn to my grandparents on my mother's side were very big art collectors, and one of the main things besides their sort of china and Polish sort of crockery was all of the incredible paintings that they brought with them and textiles. And so I was really introduced to the world of art and ornaments and textiles from, at home, from my mum's deep love for it. And my grandparents and my grandfather, my mum's dad, he was a bell maker in Poland, but in his early 50s, because he died in his very early 60s, he started painting as a hobby. And never created his own work. He always copied the great masters. And then, on father's side, my dad's sister was very creative. So, yeah, and so I guess I was introduced to Polish heritage and culture from home, but then, I would go to Polish festivals and I'm just sort of drawn to any culture that has a rich history of beautifying the everyday and so, through those textiles and through art, I was introduced to Poland, and it's really only something, and I did explore it early on in my UVO, and, it's various sort of imagery, but, most recently I've really started to focus on it and my Polish identity.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I've noticed also, like me, you use a lot of amulets.
Yes.
In your work.
Yep.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I am a big believer in magic and spirituality, and Amulets, of course, have such a rich history throughout antiquity, and I love the idea of protection. So many cultures will place, a amulet on their door, or they'll most often, I guess, they'll wear, which you know so well, I find them really beautiful and powerful, and I love that people have this belief, and that it's a belief that sort of guides them. And with my paintings, I sort of hope that they act in the same sort of way, in that they're useful in daily life. My paintings are ones that you can live with. They're very much about inviting the good, and I want to sort of tap into those sort of, into that spiritual realm. I was raised Catholic, but I've really enjoyed sort of exploring paganism, and before Christianity, that was obviously so present in my heritage, in a Polish way of life, and there are still so many sort of pagan rituals which are evident in daily life, mostly with the country people. And I just love, and I love how amulets, how they sort of are explored through different cultures, like the hand of Fatima, and then in Judaism it's the hand of Miriam. But I love that they use those same amulets throughout different histories and cultures, and
crosses over a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very much interested in cross-cultural conversations within my art. I borrow and take from myriad different cultures and myriad histories, and I just love something so ancient is still so useful today.
What are some of the typical, 'cause I don't really know about Polish amulets.
I haven't really explored Polish amulets, to be honest with you. I love how, though, in traditional dress, ribbons are a very big thing. The colour red is very prevalent, and so I love how like farmers would tie red ribbons to their cows to ward off witchcraft, and red ribbons again is a form of warding off the evil eye. And so ribbons and embroidery, embroidery for the use of warding off evil, which is very big in so many cultures, and even in Polish tradition and Slavic tradition, really. My Ukrainian friend, her aunties and grandmothers would do the same.
Their embroidery is amazing.
Yes, and they would, with a newborn, they would embroider inside the clothing of a newborn baby. So I just love all those traditions and
You mentioned traditional clothing, ceremonial clothing. Can you describe a few that you're particularly drawn to within, I was going to say Polish culture?
Well, I do love the employment of ribbons. I love that I love the sort of festive garb of so many different cultures. Like I love the Rabari, really all Indian. I'm very drawn to, I always say I was Indian in a past life, but I guess I have such a rich connection to it
through your grandparents.
My grandparents and my dad. I remember the first time I went there, it was like I'd come home. Though I felt that same way about when I went to Turkey for the first time and Italy for the first time, and so many places. But I'm actually most excited by the everyday dress that so much sort of labour goes into storytelling, history, like the the górale, which were the mountain men in Poland. They wear these incredibly, because obviously it's very, very cold there. And they would wear very, very thick felted wool jackets and pants, which, embroidered, very similar in Greek culture.
Yeah.
And, they really...
And Turkey.
And Turkey too, yes.
Some like quite thick felted
and very
from the
similar
mountains.
embroidery, which comes, they all sort of take from the same sort of symbolism, the tree of life, about fertility and bringing good luck. So, and of course always very often looking at nature. So Polish dress doesn't vary so much from area to area, cities to cities and what have you.
Oh, so it's not very regional.
No, it's not. It's not very regional. Not say like places like India where it is very regional. But Polish, I just love the incredible use of sort of beading, and always often red and usually coral beading.
Wow.
Which I love. Coral and turquoise are two of my sort of favourite.
Looks good together too.
Yes, it does. And yes, I love just the use of ribbons, and those ribbons were always, as I said earlier, a protector of, and warding off of evil. But, favourites, as I said, the Rabari tribe of India. I mean, their incredible embroidery, their incredible use of colour. It's an explosion, it's an assault, but it's a great assault. And, pink, as Diana Vreeland said, pink is the navy blue of India, and pink
so
is...
true. The men in their pink scarves, their shirts, it's beautiful.
Yes, I just adore it. And I was so taken when I was there by seeing, it was also terribly sad, but even women who are helping to build roads, or building roads, working, menial jobs, they are still dressed so beautifully.
Yeah.
And
they're not wearing stubbies.
No, they're not wearing stubbies. So so I am, and nothing is too insignificant to not be adorned. Mm-hmm. Trucks, drive with the hugest tassels and pom-poms. I was desperate to try and track down these tassels, which
they're
are
amazing.
like 2
and they
meters.
Honk.
Yeah,
they're there.
Yeah. They're there. Absolutely. But yes, I just love any culture that adorns and beautifies the everyday. And
Bali does that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like everywhere does that's not the West.
Yes, well, yes.
In some way.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Or like older traditions in Europe, they do it as well. I love that in Turkey. Everything's
me too.
A little bit superstitious.
Yes,
just
we're too casual here.
Adds a little bit of sparkle.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree.
Yep.
So you mentioned the Balkan traditions, which leads me to my next question about the kukeri.
Yep.
And your most recent exhibition.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that? Because I'm sure many people haven't heard of that, and I haven't.
Yes. Yep. Well,
either.
It was only recently, and I couldn't believe it, in the last year or so that, that's not true, but that I really started to explore.
Deep dive.
Yes, a deep dive in these incredibly elaborate costumes of the kukeri, which is a Bulgarian character, for want of a better word, but very similar tradition in Poland as well, with stemming from pagan rituals, all about harvest and promoting good harvest and so forth. But the kukeri in particular, and has always traditionally been men and young men. It was, sort of their entry into sort of manhood. But now more women are getting involved. But basically the townsfolk would spend almost all year fashioning these incredible costumes, which completely, there's no skin evident. They're covered usually in costumes made of fur or felt, incredible sort of pom-poms and again embroidery and so forth, but they're incredibly elaborate, and they're during the time of the winter solstice, They dress up in these costumes and they walk through the town, and they always employ the use of huge cowbells. And so they're, very heavy and you can imagine the racket they make as they
sound nice. I love cowbells.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I love cowbells too. But there are stories of these kukeri going into people's homes and the children being absolutely like traumatized and terrified. But what they are to do is to scare off evil and to promote, good harvest. And of course, when there is good harvest, no
abundance.
one will. Yes, yeah. So yeah, and this is a tradition has been going on for centuries.
Incredible.
But just recently there are some incredible sort of short films out there on these, which I you must have a look at.
I'd love
because
to. We'll put them in the notes of the podcast as well.
Yeah. No, they're amazing.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So having had your artwork turned into prints for clothing lines, what are some of the difference between working with a flat canvas and, body as the form?
Yep. Well, it was interesting to me because my paintings are very sort of loaded and layered and textured and immersive. And, with each new gaze, it's my hope that the viewer, sort of finds something new. And, the way you walk around the canvas, and the paints I use and the nuances of colour and texture, new discoveries are made. But the first time I collaborated with Gorman, like over 10 years ago, I made very sort of reduced...
simplified,
yes, and very, very sort of graphic prints because I wasn't comfortable with, it's such a sort of fleeting moment for people to, except for the wearer, of course.
Yeah.
But I was like, how will people read these works if they're, that it's not going to come across? So, I made these sort of very graphic sort of prints, but, always lifting from the same sort of references of nature and architecture and culture, fashion, what have you. But most recently with my collaboration with Silk Laundry, I really did consider, especially given the nature of silk.
Yeah.
And,
fluid. It's harder to structure, I suppose, isn't it?
And also to just, obviously a Pantone colour seen in a book to a computer screen to then being printed onto silk, which is such a lustrous fabric and something that, really refracts light.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, again, sort of reduced down to just pen and ink, just a black ink, which was...
Wow, that's cool though. I feel like...
Yeah, more
simple. It's like simpler to portray on silk, isn't it?
Well, yes, and, some people are like, oh, it's not very you. And it's like, well, these are yes, I don't sketch. I never plan my paintings. They're so intuitive and, one colour, one mark informs the next. But, I was putting forward symbols and motifs and amulets which I've always sort of drawn upon and abstracted or they've been the central focus in my paintings. But yeah, I also I made a conscious decision to sort of have that separation that with, my painting practice and then something that's a bit more, commercial, and I still absolutely wanted it to be, evident that it was of, my hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely had to consider things I've never considered before, like yardage and how,
of course, it's...
and to be honest, with sometimes I'd see the second print that I did, which was called the protection print. Seeing it on, say, a long dress, you got most of the motifs, but sometimes on a smaller piece,
it'd be cut off.
And so yeah, these were things that I sort of had to consider. So the placement print was, where I really felt it was the most evident of of my work.
I'll have to have a look. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. No, that have definitely.
Was it difficult to pivot from like art, so to speak, to fashion, or did you sort of just let it flow a bit?
Not really, because I didn't. A, I'm incapable of, and B, Silk Laundry have a textile designer, Laura Prochowski, who, I basically gave her my artwork, and then she did. So no, really
great collaboration.
Yeah. Although, obviously I was instrumental in going when she would show me how that yardage would appear on a garment. I'd be like, oh no, I feel like we need less space between the motifs in order to it being read, better.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, really, I hand generated by me and then
digitized.
Digitized
by Silk Laundry. I wouldn't know how to digitize anything.
Oh no,
to save myself.
No, my brother's always like, when are you going to move into the 21st century? I'm like,
I know. I don't even do design sheets on a computer.
Okay, good. Well, you're speaking my language, Olivia.
So while I want to talk about something slightly different.
Yep.
So while some of your recent work became more figurative, your more early works were a bit more abstract.
Yep.
Can you speak to that and the shift, and if was you were cognizant of that, or if it was a natural sort of evolution?
Yeah, no, I would say natural evolution. I mean, yes, in the early days, pure abstract works, and then slowly started to sort of blur the lines between abstraction and representation, because I was always like, well, it's not so evident, the myriad sort of imagery that I sort of look at and am so drawn to. And I guess I did want that to be sort of more evident. So yes, I guess it was a more of a conscious sort of realisation too, to start employing and making, as I said, more evident all of those incredible images that I was drawn to. But yeah, I guess they've always been a cross between abstraction, representation and the painterly. But, they're very sort of, my works are an emotional response to, all that I have seen and places imagined and those that, are real. And, they start off sort of very chaotic, like me. I'm a pretty sort of chaotic person at times.
Excitable.
Yeah, excitable, very easily.
It's a nicer word.
Okay, all right, that's true. Very easily excitable. But, they were really abstract expressionist works. And, they were very performative, but then they also, and physical, but then they became, as, they would always start off very automatic, but then they would become sort of more considered and conscious. But yeah, I guess in the last few years, I have definitely sort of explored more representation and figuration, and, I'm so obsessed with the domestic, and there are a lot of there's really very little sort of distinction between my home life and my practice. I am currently with a home studio, although that's changing in the next couple of months, because basically I'm an incorrigible night owl, and I do my best work
Wow. At night time?
At night, when there's no distractions. My son has gone to bed. I can't.
How old's your son?
He's 13, almost 14, about to turn 14, going on 25. And, so having a home studio and being able to roll into my studio in my pajamas was sort of very easy. But now that, he's a bit older, I'm sort of realising that I really do need to sort of separate the two, which is sad in a way, because everything that I acquire, is, I just justify the purchase because it feeds into my practice. And
it still will.
Yeah, it's still, of course. So it still will. So
it's hard though to have the definition. I relate to that.
Yeah.
Because you kind of want the privacy.
Yes.
But at the same time...
Yeah, I do not like working with people. So I don't like works being sort of seen when they're in progress, and I sort of do love the solitary existence of being an artist.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, being inviting other artists in to sort of critique your work and give feedback is definitely important. But I like my own company a little too much.
Yeah.
And I love just going into my own
typical of
yes. Yeah.
people in our fields.
Yeah, it is, of course. Yeah. I'm always pushing myself. I'm always exploring, and for me, it's important to continually, evolve. And so, yeah, I've really enjoyed, moving into more of that sort of representation and really sort of, giving time to these amazing, my history and my identity, my Polish culture. So yeah.
That's fun. So you obviously, you're interested equally in the natural world but also the domestic world.
Yes.
Do you think that's a little bit of a reflection of your own transition now that you were just speaking about? Or is that something you've always found interesting to observe and reflect in your work?
Yeah, I have that, exactly. Nature and culture. My works are really about nature and culture, and nature informs my practice so much. And so often in the past people would say, oh, they're such plastic colours, and I'd be like, well, no, think about the colour of a beetle's wing.
Yeah.
Think about, tropical
plastic,
fish.
that's interesting.
Yeah. They and I'm like, no, I completely refute that. I mean, even, almost fluorescent colour. I mean, I've seen almost fluorescent sunsets, as have we all.
I saw a bright fluorescent yellow snail in Bali.
Oh, well, there you go.
You couldn't even make that up.
Amazing. And fungi, the colours. I mean, I've been looking recently at fungi in China, and it's so it's incredible. Yeah. Actually, at MIF at the moment, there's an amazing film which I really want to see on the world of fungi.
Ooh,
yes.
Good record.
So I look, nature is where I feel most supported. I'm very passionate about its preservation, and I'm so interested in our relationship to it and animals and but culture and architecture, fashion, these are things which sort of feed me and that I marvel at and need in my life. And beauty, it may sound shallow, but beauty is my religion. Aesthetics inform every decision I make in acquiring things, something from a teacup that I sip my tea from to the blanket on my bed. I take great joy in being
around beautiful things.
Yeah.
I think beauty's a virtue.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you read John O'Donoghue?
No.
So he talks a lot about needing to feast your eyes with beauty every day.
Okay, I need to read.
Yeah, he's a Celtic poet and writer.
Yep.
And he speaks about that. And I relate to that because I think now we've sort of, started to sort of minimise the definition of beauty. But in ancient cultures like India, they worship goddesses of beauty.
Yes.
And it's not about an objectification. It's it's a lifestyle of feeding your inner Venus almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I relate to that.
I completely. John O'Donoghue, you are my hero. I shall be looking you up.
Evie agrees.
Yes.
I'll send
work,
you
Evie.
some references.
Yes, please.
It's a beautiful book.
Yep.
Anakara is one of his beautiful books, and he talks a lot about waking up in the morning, going straight out into nature.
Yep.
To get, your eyes full of beauty in the landscape.
Well, we know now, scientists are talking about forest bathing and how, and I mean, when my son was 5, I was, really worried about, I'm such a consumer and I didn't want that for him from, he was wanting this and wanting that and more. And I was like, no. You've got time for that.
Yeah.
We're moving to the hills. So we moved to the Dandenong Ranges because I wanted him to be climbing trees
nice.
and you know, getting dirty and breathing in that incredible mountain air. And he tired of that when he was 10. He couldn't skateboard there, so we moved back to the city,
Big Smoke.
to the Big Smoke. If you can call Camberwell the Big Smoke, not really. But still, I love living there. Although we're about to move again for school, because of the incredible verdant gardens and
it's a great area for the gardens.
Yeah, I love it. My garden at the moment is just awash with pink,
Beautiful.
magnolia and camellias and rhododendrons and
amazing.
So yeah, it's
not to be underrated.
No, absolutely not. Yep.
So we're talking now about artwork in general.
Yes.
So when you got here, you looked at some of mine, and we both have a few mutual contacts.
Yes.
Friends.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So aside from your own artwork, obviously, who do you have hanging in your house?
Yep. Well, only recently that I've had my own work hanging in my house, because I always was so drawn to other people's work. I look and creating my own. I'm like, I don't want to look at that. But yeah, I've always been, I don't know, I've always liked the idea of me selling my work and then keeping that sort of cycle of, art making going. And so it's always really important for me to acquire another artist's work. I've bought a lot, but I've also swapped a lot. But artists from Justin Williams to Dan Kyle, Georgia Spain, Leah Fraser, Adam Lee. He's so drawn to mythology, as is Leah Fraser, and there's Claudia Greathead and really beautiful poetic paintings. She's a real love of nature and flowers in particular.
Yeah.
I have a Geordie Kerwick literally on its way,
Fun.
Being delivered today from France, which, love an artist swap.
What about the greats? I mean, obviously you wouldn't have any hanging in your house.
Oh, no,
unless
sadly
you're
not.
Bill Gates. But who do you really love?
Look, that list is incredibly long, but Paul Klee, Matisse.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just an absolute master. Hilma af Klint, whose work
is
amazing. And because of her, we've had to rewrite the history books, and everybody thought that Kandinsky was really the true first sort of abstractionist, but then Hilma af Klint's work was only discovered in the last sort of 20 years, because it was her wish for it to not be, they were hidden away until I think it was 100 years after her death. She was very specific about when they were to be shown to the public. If money wasn't an issue, I'd own a Hilma af Klint or a Qajar painting. I love the the legacy that the Shahs from Turkey left on Persian paint, or they really sort of turned Persian painting on its head with new technologies and I guess a new reign. But the Qajar paintings were unlike anything Persia had seen before, because obviously they were always used to the sort of the miniatures. But
I love the miniatures.
I do too, but the Qajar paintings were of really big scale and often painted directly onto the walls of palaces. But there's always someone that I
would love. I would love to have more walls, but
yes, well, there's that issue too. My walls are pretty much, and look, actually, Emily Kame Anwara, if I could really have somebody, I mean, she is not just a favourite First Nations artist of mine. She's one of my favourite artists, full stop. She didn't pick up her paintbrush until her, I think, late 60s.
Wow.
And in 10 years or less than 10 years, she was so prolific.
Incredible.
Incredibly
was
prolific.
Her calling.
Yep, it was. And her use of her use of colour is just incredible. And, you know, she said that she was basically capturing her land, you know, the Utopia region when they were incredibly colourful, like the Al-Hakir Suite, which is this 25 panel, I think it's 25 or 22 panel painting, which resides in the National Gallery in Canberra. You know, she's captured the wild grasses and flowers as they come into bloom in spring in the Utopia. It's incredible.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Olivia, because obviously we have so many similar sort of interests and I've loved chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Come in anytime.
Oh, thank you.
This was the Cleopatra's Bling podcast with me, Olivia Cummings. Next time...
There's quite a lot of vegetables or wild, you know, kind of wild crafted plants that are unique to Bali. There's even a leaf called bulun baun, and I don't even know what the Indonesian translation of that is.
That's just Balinese.
Yeah.
Until then, stay curious.